Hey guys, how you doing out there? It's time for another episode of From the Crow's Mouth, a video podcast hosted by yours truly, Mitch Cumming, lead singer, songwriter, guitar player for the band Stone Cold Crows, and this is episode 15. Today, I'm going to talk to you about what goes into releasing a new song. Why would I talk about that? Well, as you might know, we are releasing a new song pretty soon, March 4th. And for those of you who think that all the work is done when that record button has been pressed for the last time, well, let me tell you, that's only the beginning. There's a lot that goes into releasing a song afterwards, a lot of T's to cross, I's to dot, etc. But while we talk about that, I'm going to show you how to make one of my favorite drinks and one of the probably most iconic cocktails. Simple yet effective, as usual, as in a good cocktail. The old fashioned. Maybe you've had one. If you haven't, let me tell you, if you don't love it, it's probably because the bartender didn't make it right. Because when made appropriately, this is just magnificence. So before we start talking about what goes into a song, let's see how to make an old fashioned. Today we're going to be using bourbon, but you can make it with rye, and I will explain in the bar section of the video just some of the differences of the flavor between the two. So without further ado, let's make an old fashioned, and then we'll talk about some song release background stuff. Cheers. Hey guys, on today's Rock and Roll Bartender segment of From the Crow's Mouth, a video podcast hosted by me, Mitch Cumming, lead singer and guitar player for the band Stone Cold Crows, I am going to show you how to make one of the most classic, iconic cocktails in the history of cocktails, the Old Fashioned. Now, if you've been following this podcast, I told you that this month, featuring rye and bourbon, I was going to explain a little of the differences of the two, and this is a drink that you can use either to make. Personally, I prefer bourbon, and that's what I'll be using today. I'm going to use Maker's Mark, and I chose it specifically for a reason because Maker's Mark is an example of a different bourbon type than traditional, in the sense that it uses wheat in the mash. So the difference between bourbon and rye is that generally bourbon is more sweet and a little more mellow than rye, which is a spicy finish. Bourbon, by law, which 95% of bourbon comes from Kentucky in the United States, 51% of the grain bill to use to make the alcohol has to be corn. But the 49% can be used any other way. And Maker's Mark uses wheat, which in alcohol, wheat adds a little bit of sweetness. And personally, I like my old fashions with just a little hint of sweetness because it goes really well with the orange oils that we were going to be using. So, there's a little tidbit of information for you. Rye, 51% rye. Bourbon, 51% corn. The differences are quite apparent, and each brand afterwards experiments with different grains. So, whiskey to whiskey, bourbon to bourbon, they're all quite different. So, you're going to have to find out what profile you like better. For an old fashioned, I like bourbon. I like a little bit sweeter. I use Buffalo Trace a lot actually, but we're going to use Maker's Mark today. So what you're going to need, and this is a simple cocktail to make, but when done appropriately is fantastic. So you're going to need 2 ounces of bourbon. You're going to need simple syrup or a sugar cube that you can muddle in the glass. Simple syrup's just, well, simple. So I'm going to use some of that. I have some store-bought stuff that I received as a gift, so that'll work perfectly. You're going to need, as usual, our favorite little buddy here, Angostura bitters. And of course, a few tools to make this process a little better. You're going to want to be able to peel the rind, or rather the peel of an orange. You're going to want to have a large rock, an ice rock, to put in your glass for the old-fashioned. You can use crushed ice, but 1 large cube is a lot preferred. I'm using a mixing glass filled with ice to chill the drink. You can use a shaker or just another glass. It does make a difference to chill the drink before you put it into your glass. And yeah, that's it, a measuring tool. So, let's make one. This is also the first time I'm going to open this bottle. So, because Maker's Mark is sealed with wax, you might, if it's a little stubborn, it's nice to have a knife handy just to cut through it, but they pretty much know what they're doing. See how easy that was? So, I'm going to take my measurement tool here. I want 2 ounces. 2 ounces of Makers. In the mixing glass you go. That smells good. Simple syrup. Now this is really up to you how much you want to use. Again, if you like them sweeter, put a little bit more. I generally put between 1/4 and 1/3 of an ounce of simple syrup in mine. Any more than that, and I find it really gets a little too sweet. You want to let the bourbon kind of take the take the wheel in this cocktail. And then after that, a couple shakes of bitters. I like bitters, so I always usually add an extra shake, but that is up to you. And we are going to stir to chill the drink. Now, while we stir, make sure it's nice and chilled. You can let it sit there for a second after, because what you're going to want to do, you're going to take your Scotch rock or your ice rock. These little things are so handy. They cost literally nothing. You can get them at a dollar store, and they just make nice circular ice balls, or you can get the big square ones. Just make sure that whatever kind of glass you're using, an old-fashioned glass, which is essentially a double rocks glass, you can actually fit it in there. I've had some glasses that actually don't fit them, and it's kind of embarrassing when you're trying to make a drink. Last but not least, and this is the key step for making a good old-fashioned. You are going to want to peel a large bit of your orange. So, as you can see here, that's a fairly sizable piece of the peel. You don't want to get more than the peel, because what you want is you want the oils from the peel, and you're going to take it and you're just going to gently express it, so you're going to squeeze it over the glass. What that does is that releases the aroma and the oils from the skin. And then you're going to take said peel and you're just going to run it along the rim of the glass. So what that does is, and you're going to drop it in there, but what that does is at every sip you take, you will get a little bit of that orange flavor, and that is a key component of this drink. So at this point, I'm just going to take my strainer, strain it all liquid over, and voila, you have one of the most classic cocktails in the world, the Old Fashioned. So cheers to that, and I will see you on the music part of the podcast. Okay, so we're back, and we've got an old-fashioned, and I hope that you have the ingredients to make this, because you don't need a lot. So if you bought a bottle of bourbon or rye, one that you like, you should be able to make one of these, no problem. Maybe go to the grocery store, get an orange, whatever. Very simple, but God, isn't that delicious? And a little bit of orange with every sip. Okay, but that's not what we're here to talk about today, is it? We're here to talk about what goes into a song release. You might notice that I'm wearing a new shirt with the artwork on it for our new song coming out on March 4th, Perdition at Sea. I will do an episode later to talk to you about what went into the song, but you could probably guess, based on the title and the artwork, that some level of Moby Dick inspiration is in there, and you would not be wrong. So what happens, though? The song has been written. That is step one, by the way, to releasing a new song. You kind of have to write it. You know, you can't just pull things out of the air and expect to be able to do all the legwork before it's actually created. But we talked a little bit about that last week. So now comes the fun stuff. So the recording button in your recording studio or your home studio or whatever you're using to record the song on, hopefully professionally if you're going to release it, because the world has so much new music coming out every single day now that if it is not top quality, people will literally forget about you and they won't play your music, and it's really hard to gain any kind of traction. So make sure you record it professionally and it sounds good, and take your time if you need it. You know, don't rush it. So you've recorded it. So what happens next? Well, depending on who you are recording it with, whether it's self-done or not, you're going to need to mix it. Now, what mixing is, for those of you who aren't musically inclined in the industry, what that means is that somebody is taking all the individual parts of your song. So you've got, say, like 2 guitars, you've got a bass, you got some drums, and now what they're doing is they are going to position that sound so that when it comes out of your speakers, it's not all just coming at you at the same volume and it just sounds like a big clattered bunch of noise. Everything has to be put in its specific place. Maybe the vocals need to be louder during this part than another part, or maybe the background vocals need to come up or down to accent different parts. When you watch a live performance, if you were to go to an auditorium, which were built, for orchestras, like they are designed so that sound comes out a certain way. That's why they have that kind of like cave-like shape to them, so that the way that sound moves from behind that off the walls comes out so that you can hear everything. Maybe you've been to a concert before, and depending on where you're sitting, the sound just isn't that good. That's probably because you went to a sports arena, which is not designed for sound. And if you're not sitting in line with the mixing engineer, the guy who does all the sound at the show, you might not be able to hear what he hears, because he has to make sure that the sound is adjusted based on what he can hear where he's sitting. So, fun tip, when you go to concerts, if you want it to sound good, find out where the mixing engineer is going to be on your floor plan and buy tickets somewhere in line with that. So, maybe it's the same guy, maybe it's not. Your recording engineer is often not your mixing engineer. So you get all your sound files recorded from your recording engineer, and you send them somewhere else to someone else to be mixed. We do not do that because we have a great working relationship with Adam Newcomb of Newcomb Studios, and he knows our sound, and we decided we're going to trust to see what he can do, and we love the results. So we kind of actually actively mix our music as we're recording it, so that it's less work for him later, but we also have an understanding of the dynamics of the sound before it gets to this stage. But it is an important stage, so mixing has to be done. The sound comes out, it's balanced. You've got your high stringed instruments and everything, they sit up high, that's how they come out of the speaker, and generally the lower frequency stuff, so like bass drum, low instruments, they sit on the floor. And that's his job. It's like to build the wall of sound so that it's not just little patches here and there, it's full. Then it has to be mastered. Now, if you're wondering what mastering means, what that is if you were to release an album, which we did, you want to make sure that the volume level is not jumping from super loud to super quiet. Maybe you've watched a movie or something, or a show on Netflix, and it seems like when the music comes in, all of a sudden, you're watching it late at night and you rush to find the remote to turn it down so you don't wake everybody up. To me, that's just bad mastering. Like, why is this so loud and then so quiet all of a sudden? So you want everything to be balanced, and that is what mastering is. And so that is usually somebody else who didn't mix the music as well. Again, we do everything with Adam Newcomb at the moment, but maybe down the road we'll say, hey, let's try somebody else. And oftentimes what bands will do is they will send their mixes that they get from their mixing engineer to 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different companies to master a single track. And they will often do that very cheaply and sometimes for free as here's what it's going to sound like if you use us. You accept you like this one the best, you pick that mastering company or mastering engineer, and off they go. So you got to get that. So that's all the work that just goes into getting the sound file. That has nothing to do with the release itself. You just want to have a good sounding product. After that, well, in the modern age, you need some kind of artwork, because when you upload your music to Spotify or Apple or whatever it is, you need an art file. And if you chintz out on the art, this is the music industry, but people judge a book by its cover. So if you don't spend the money on your art to look professional, or you use a professional photo or whatever, people don't take you seriously. It has to be unique. It has to be uploaded. There needs to be a picture. So you got to get some artwork done. Maybe you know somebody who does great design and you hire them. Have them do something up for you and digitize it. Personally, I outsource. I find artists who I like their portfolio through Fiverr. Great service for that. And I hire artists. I give them the concept, and I make sure that it is what I want before. But this is done way in advance so that you're not rushing come release time and all of a sudden you don't have the artwork ready, but it's got to be out. So make sure that is being done probably while the track is being mixed and mastered, because at this point you already know what the song sounds like. And you can pick an image that sort of goes with that. Then what you want to do is you need to register your music. And it amazes me how many musicians just don't do this step. You want to collect royalties, right? Of course you do. So if you're going to release music, you want to have it registered as your work, and they need to know, A, how to pay you, what kind of splits, and you're going to register it with multiple companies. Now, it used to be that you would have to do this all yourself, or a record label would do it, but now you can go through a publishing company with a publishing agreement, and a lot of times they will do that. But the difference is because there are different things you have to register for. For example, in Canada, SOCAN is the performing rights organization that collects royalties for ownership of songs, but they collect performing royalties. So I would get paid by them royalties if I were to perform the music live somewhere, but that's not the same as what gets collected, say my song was to appear on the radio or in a TV commercial. That is different. That is a publishing company. Now, we use CD Baby for our releases, and so what they will do is, because we have to pay them for all this stuff, and they take a percentage of our royalties as a fee as well, ongoing, but they will register our music with performing rights organizations all over the world, actually, and that's part of their shtick. So it's a good deal for us because they essentially take care of the work and make sure that we get paid whenever our song is used. So if you're watching like a YouTube video like this one, it will detect that our song, Ghost in the Bottle, is being played in the background. And if somebody else decides to use that song in their video, YouTube or whatever will send them and say, hey, this is copyright material owned by this. So just so you know, they're getting paid if you decide to use this song. And if we wanted to, we could send a cease and desist letter because it's unauthorized use of our music, and they would have to take it down. Intellectual property is super important in the music industry. And I know a lot of musicians don't care to know anything about the business, but that's why there are so many musicians and horror stories out there of artists just getting completely screwed over because they don't pay attention to their rights and they don't pay attention to where their royalties in their agreements. So I highly suggest that you do some kind of basic level of research and learn about it because it is critical to your success in the music business. So we got the fun stuff out of the way. It's registered with the performing rights organization, so you can collect it when you play live. You can collect it royalties in any form that it is gone, and you've got somebody looking out for you there. Perfect. You need to set a release date. And when you register your music with something, like CD Baby is the only one I personally have gone through with, they will be like, okay, so when's this song coming out? And you need to give yourself lots of time in advance because the music has to be reviewed by the organization to make sure, A, that you're not just stealing somebody else's work and that it is able to come out. So you need to pick a release date in advance that's going to allow them 3 to 6 weeks to find that and make sure it gets done. The last thing you want to do is announce to your fans that your song's coming out on March 4th, and on March 1st you decide to register your music, and guess what? They didn't get to it, and now it's not coming out. You got a pretty disappointed fan base, so don't make that mistake. I would say at least minimum 3 weeks. You should do that if you're going to be releasing the music to streaming services particularly. This song of ours is a little different coming out because we are releasing it direct from our website. This is one of those ways of rewarding our fans differently and maybe getting a little bit of income back because Spotify royalties pretty much suck unless you're making millions of streams. We're not there yet. So this is one of those like exclusive fan things that down the road it's like, hey, I have songs that aren't available everywhere else. We're going to be doing that once in a while in between other releases. Just a thing. That's the new music industry. You have to choose, and that is part of what I'm going to talk about next. But first, you want to promote your release after you have your release date. You want to pitch it to press. What's the best way to get people interested in a new song? How about a review by online magazine or a print magazine, which we have been fortunate enough to have both done for our some of our singles and our debut album. Despite the fact that we haven't played live before, we got pretty positive press, and as a result, we got interest from people who would never have heard of us otherwise. And press is good because then when you're pitching your songs down the road, say to radio or other opportunities, you have little clips that say, hey, these guys are no joke, they're real, they're good, and all of a sudden it's from a credible source. It's almost like going back to university and citing in your essay where you got your ideas from. This is kind of the same deal. So you can find a list of organizations, make your own, maybe check out who other bands similar to you are getting reviewed by, and then find their editor's contact information, and way in advance, because press can move very slow. You want to pitch it and see if you can get any bites and maybe get yourself some coverage. So that's an important step. Make sure also, this is just a side note, I know bands don't like talking about money, but save yourself the headache of what can happen if things go wrong down the road. You need to know who owns the sound recording, and you need to have that done in writing, and you need to know what your songwriter splits are. And this will happen while you're registering your music, because when you register with a performing rights organization or with a publisher, they're going to ask, what's the percentage of, how is this royalty getting divided? Who wrote the lyrics? What percentage of the composition do they own, etc. So talk with your bandmates before somebody just goes and decides it's going to be even down the middle. If one guy did all the work, you need to make sure that you have that written down in writing and signed, because otherwise there's been a lot of friendships ruined over money and a lot of lawsuits as a result. So don't do it. Just have that conversation before you release anything. Because who knows? The song could be the next biggest thing ever, and some guy got screwed, or somebody didn't feel that they were, getting the money they thought they should, so just do it. Then you got to choose, like I said, how are you releasing it? And that's sort of what I was talking about. When you go through that registration process, you can release it to literally every friggin' streaming service in the world if you want. You can release it to a catalog that can be used for sync agents to pick. And what a sync agent does is they find music to put into TV and film, depending on what the musical director of that is looking for. So let's say you write happy outgoing music with a lot of whistles and stuff. Well, you're probably going to appeal to like a TELUS commercial or something, because that seems to be what they use. It turns out writing about, killer whales and stuff like that's not the best way to sell shaving cream or whatever it is. But you never know, because the instrumental music that we have is pretty epic. So down the road, you never know what's going to happen. But make sure you have that option checked off when you register your music. We have decided we are releasing this direct to fans, so that is part of our plan. But you need to know how you're going to distribute it. And that includes physical formats, because the last thing you want to do is throw a CD release party, if those still exist, or vinyl, and vinyl takes a long time to press. So if you don't have the product in your hand when you set that release date, and you haven't done your homework and made sure that you've given yourself enough time to have it ready, that's a problem. So you need to know what format you're releasing your music in, and then make sure you have it in your hand before that release date. Yes, you're excited, your song's done, it sounds great, you can't wait to share it with the world, but take your time, because screwing up the release it's very bad. It leaves a bad taste in your fans' mouth, it's embarrassing, and it's certainly noted by other industry professionals. So after you have the format, your song's out, you're ready to go, you're done, right? Wrong. Because you put all this time, all this money into this song, you want it to be a success, and it's out in the world, well, now your real work just begins, because you need to promote it. You need to promote it on social media. Maybe you're going to run targeted ads. Maybe you're going to run promotions on your website. Maybe you're going to have a direct email campaign, contests, word of mouth, everything. You need to be pushing this song for months and months after it comes out. Because that's the thing. Once the song is out and, our fans have already heard it. Yeah, somebody's heard it, but everybody who hasn't is still going to hear it for the first time if they hear it. And the first time can be anytime. Hell, I remember the first time I heard the song Crazy Train. The song came out years before I was ever born, and yet that first time was still the first time for me. So the song promotion is basically ongoing once it's out. Yeah, you're going to be promoting new music, but the classics are classics for a reason. You go to an Iron Maiden concert, they're going to be playing the song The Number of the Beast. Even though that album was their third album, and they've put out I don't know how many since then. So remember, always promote your music and don't be ashamed. People think you're bugging them, and some people will be like that, but realistically, you're not targeting those people. You're trying to promote it so that somebody who hasn't heard of you is going to catch on and maybe give it a listen, and maybe you've got yourself a new fan after that. Marketing is an entirely different subject, and there are tons of ways to do that, and maybe we'll talk about that in another episode, but that is essentially the last step, but it is a step that doesn't end. So there you go. That is my lengthy ramble. I'm looking at the camera time right now. It says 18 minutes. So that's a long episode today, but it is important, and if you're a musician, make sure to note these steps if you're missing something. And if you're not a musician, well, maybe you learned a little bit about how much work goes into releasing music, especially in today's day and age. So with that, guys, I'm going to say I'm really looking forward to releasing our new song, Perdition at Sea, a 6.5 minute epic. We think we've raised the bar with this one. I'm so excited about it. But we'll have to wait a little bit longer for that one. So until next week, guys, cheers. And remember to create cool shit and dare to be different. See you next time.